Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is a life and leadership podcast where we're exploring the pages of the books on our shelves and how we're living those pages out loud. My name's Denise Russo. I'm here with my co-host, Sam Powell, and we are walking through the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. This is a book about making tiny changes in our life that have remarkable results through the way we build and live out the habits in our life. Today we are in the second law of this book. We're at chapter 9, so we're about halfway through the book. Sam, it's great to be here with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to this chapter because it's all about the role that our family and friends have in shaping our habits. And I just have loved how over the last several months, our friendship has grown and strengthened. And some of that comes from also us talking about our shared love for our families. So looking forward to going through the second law with you. This is all about the culture that we live in, how our behaviors become attractive to us, how we adopt habits based on the people we hang around, how we imitate habits from people that are around us. And I'm looking forward to exploring this chapter with you. So tell me a little bit about what you got out of this chapter.
So I like how one of the title or subheadings in this title is the seductive pull of social norms. And I love that, right? Because we're thinking about how things are attractive. And so when we're thinking about our family and friends, we're thinking about the community around us or those that we see in our community around us. It's really understanding the power and the importance of that attractiveness of what the group is doing, right? There's, Charles Darwin's quoted as saying, in the long history of humankind, those who learned to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed, right? So those who can fit in with the group and really right, we are social creatures at the end of the day. And, we see that if we can fit in, there's this pull to seeing all the things that we want are on the other side of, kind of fitting in with these social norms. I think we see this in high schools all the time, right? Junior highs all the time.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's sort of a contrast when you think of immigrants to this country, for example, is that they're coming to a country that they think is one way, but they're bringing these norms and behaviors from the country that they're coming from. I was watching a documentary recently on the making of the Pixar film Elemental, and the producer of the film was a person whose parents had immigrated to New York from Korea, and they started a business. The dad actually had started a hot dog stand, came to the country with literally less than $200. And the story goes that when they moved here, it was $75 for a month to rent an apartment, and it cost $75 to rent this hot dog stand. And so literally this family came here with nothing. And they created this hot dog stand because the norm of the city was to have a hot dog stand in New York City. Even if you think now of New York City, you think of hot dogs and pretzels on the street, Broadway shows, maybe a baseball game if you're a Yankees or Mets fan, I suppose. And so as time went on, though, the parents wanted to have their children adopt, live out, love being Korean, and yet the kids were going to an American blended diverse high school. And so there became this contrast. And at one time in Peter's life, he's the producer of the film Elemental, he decided that he wanted to be an artist, like a cartoon animator. And his parents were like, no, you cannot do that. That's not what our culture and society does. You'll never be successful. You'll never make any money. Well, he was just discouraged by it because all he really wanted to do was draw. And so he had a book that he had from middle school where he was drawing these animated pictures on pages of his math book. And his brother found it after all these years. And he was flipping through the pages and just showing that all along he had this love. And the pull for him wanting to be an animator really became what turned out to become this movie. If you've never seen it, it didn't do that great, I don't think, in the movie theater. I think it was bad marketing, but actually the film film is really good, and it's a great storyline that has so much to do with exactly what this chapter is talking about, which is making family and friends shape your habits and the role that our cultures play, and what happens when there's a contradiction for that. So I highly recommend seeing it. If you have Disney Plus, you'll be able to get it on Disney Plus. This was the documentary of the making of the film, but then also the animated film is also available to see. And so that was first the story that I was thinking of here, because there is something about growing up in a culture that prioritizes certain things. In fact, James talks about in the very beginning of the chapter, there was these two little girls that grew up in a culture where every day their dad was teaching them how to play chess. And they became so fond of and loving of chess that all they wanted to do was play chess. And then they ended up becoming these master chess players. I think if you even were to study master athletes, like the most famous tennis players or soccer players or golfers, they all started from these habits that started with family and friends shaping their identity. And what happens when that changes?
Yeah. I was just talking to my husband about Deion Sanders has been all over the news because of everything he's doing in Colorado right now. And then I saw on a TikTok that like his son's on his team. And then my husband was like, that's like two sons on his team. And he has a daughter who's at the baseball. And then then he has another son who actually does all the marketing for him. And I was like, what? I'm like, 4 out of 5 kids are at the same school with him in this sports environment, right? Because that was the norm, right? You grew up in this very sports heavy environment. And, that's, it's such an interesting thing. Your story about the guy who did Elemental reminded me of a story I just read about a guy whose dad was a fisherman, and he was the only person in the family who just did not want to be a fisherman. And so his dad started calling him good for nothing Joe, because he didn't the smell made him gag. He got seasick on the boat, did not want to be a fisherman. And so his dad literally called him good for nothing Joe, over and over and over again, just because he didn't want to do this one, this one thing. Well, his older brother loved to play baseball with his friends, right? I read a lot of sports stuff, but loved to play baseball with his friends. And so good for nothing Joe would go and play baseball all the time with his brother. Turns out he was really, really good at it. And, where the environment around him, the people, the friends around him are like, oh yeah, you're way better than all of us. Right. You're somebody to look up to, and just your natural ability here and what you're able to do and all this kind of stuff. And so years and years and years go on, right? Good for nothing Joe goes and, pursues baseball because this friend environment around him is like, yeah, go for it. This is great. Well, this good for nothing Joe turns out to be Joe DiMaggio.
Wow.
He ends up being this one of the greatest baseball, it's one of the names everybody knows, right? But this environment, and it was such an interesting story. But there's this seductive pull of these social norms, right? Of there's this pull of I want to work hard. My dad works hard as a fisherman. There's that part of it, but I don't want to be this, but hey, I'm getting pulled in maybe this other direction because my brother dragged me along to play, pick a, sandlot baseball and, around, and I can turn that really into something else. But it's super interesting. And James goes on to say, we imitate the habits of 3 particular groups, and it's the close. So people who are close to us, the many, when there's lots of, everybody's doing it type of a thing. And then the powerful, right? People that we see who are kind of removed from us, but have everything we want, right? Oh, if I could just be like this person or this celebrity or whatever, right? They've got everything that I want. And so we tend to imitate those 3 groups, whoever's closest to us, whoever in mass around us, and who's really powerful. But yeah, so James goes on to really talk about those groups, and the first ones are the close. So what stood out to you as you talk about those closest to you and imitating what's happening with them?
What's sticking out in my mind for that is you were just talking about Joe DiMaggio, and he's an Italian American. And so it got me to thinking about, as you know, for if you've ever listened to any of our episodes, I always reference Disney and movies, and I just referenced Elemental. So I have to reference, of course, an Italian Pixar Disney film, which is Luca. And so Luca was this film that's sort of like a modern, almost like a modern Little Mermaid in a way, because in the film Luca, Luca is this young boy who actually was a fish. And he didn't want to be like his family. He didn't want to imitate the Close. He wanted to imitate the people that he saw that lived on land. And so he found one day that he could get out of the water. And when he got out of the water, immediately his fins turned into feet when his body was dry. So unlike Little Mermaid, who wanted so badly to be a human and had to give her voice away to get legs, in Luca, when his fins dried off, he automatically had the legs. Well, in the film, he ends up finding a friend who he became very close to that was a boy, but the boy didn't have a family, but he was doing all these destructive things. And Luca thought he was the greatest thing ever because he could stay up late at night and he could eat whatever he wanted. And yet that boy wanted what Luca had, which was the love of his family. And as it so turns out later in the film, well, gosh, I guess this is the spoiler, but it turns out the boy wasn't a boy. The boy was also a fish, but had become so adapted to the many that he lived a life among these humans. And then later in the movie, as it goes on, the humans were afraid of these fish, and so they didn't want them around them. And so at the end, you'll have to watch to see what happens, but it's really around the habits that these boys were shaping, but how they were able to help a community and a society to come to love who they really were to begin with. It's a really good movie. All the Pixar films have such good lessons in them. But it's hard when you're imitating the many because you're trying to conform. And you were telling me a story off the microphone, Sam, about a guy with some chimes, and I thought it was fascinating. So tell our listeners about the imitating the many and how easy it is to create habits that are based on just watching other people.
Yeah, definitely will do that. Before we do that, let's close out the close though. So James says in here, join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. And 2, you already have something in common with the group, right? So when you're trying to leverage the seductive power of the close, make sure that the people around you, the close, are doing the things you want to do, right? Are doing that habit that you want to do, because it really is one of the most powerful things that we naturally imitate.
I'll say something real quick on that too, though. Based on what you just said, is that sometimes we don't want to do the things that are the people that are closest to us. So you have to be really conscious about who you have around you, right?
Yeah.
I had a mentor once that said to me, if you can't change the people around you, then you need to change the people around you. And that was really a powerful statement of saying that you can change yourself, but you can't necessarily change others. And so who are you hanging around, and are they filling you up or emptying you out? Are they lifting you up or pulling you down?
Yeah, that's really important, right? Because you can't always choose the people around you. Like you can't choose the coworkers that are on your team that you sit next to, and maybe like the Debbie Downer is right next to you who's dragging you down. And so you really have to find that way to, like we talked about in the last episode, to become conscious that the close maybe isn't what exactly you want. And so you're going to have to put a mental barrier in place or an emotional barrier in place so that you don't end up imitating the close. So if you can put people that you want around you in the close, do it. If you can't, build yourself up enough to be blocked from, maybe the things. And then hopefully you have a good influence on them. You become the close that they start imitating. That would be lovely.
You made a point on here where it says the shared identity begins to reinforce your personal identity. So again, goes back to saying, if you look at the people that are around you, that's what you're maybe known for, or you're known as, or who you're known to be associated with. And that's why this goal of picking and choosing who you're around is crucial to maintaining good quality habits. It's friendship and community that embed a new identity and help behaviors last over the long run, is what James says, which is also a really powerful and yet frightening thought, that the people that you are around the most are going to dictate how you live your life, even if you want to change those people. It gets me to thinking about, I know we have this other story I really want you to share, but it got me to thinking about this television series that I recently finished binge watching that won a whole bunch of awards, Breaking Bad, which is kind of funny because it's not the typical type of a television show I would normally have watched, but it was a show about these people that were creating massive amounts of methamphetamines and drugs. So it wasn't positive at all what they were doing, but the role of family and friends shaped the entire film, from the way a school teacher found somebody who was kind of a bad kid and associated himself with that to get what he wanted in life, which was more money. But he wanted the money because he was struggling with having cancer. And as a school teacher, he couldn't afford his treatments. So he ended up getting these bad habits to make money based on the role that these so-called friends were having in shaping his habits. And he ended up turning into this kingpin drug dealer. And in the end, it was destructive for him. And he kind of shares how through that process, he ended up turning into a person he never really wanted to be. And it ended up having a spin-off film or television show called Better Call Saul, which was interesting as well, because it started with a guy who was a lawyer who in the beginning seemed to have wanted to do good in life, ended up surrounding himself with family and friends who were not good for him on both sides, family and friends. And he ended up having a very destructive life that ended up just not turning out the way that it should have turned out for him. And so how important it is for us to be very centered and very focused on who our friends are and the communities we're around and the habits that we form based on the people that we socialize with.
Mm-hmm. And it calls back to the cues in your environment, right? We imitate those that we're closest to because they are the most frequent cues in our environment, right? Like I see somebody running every single day. My husband gets out of bed and runs every single day. Then eventually it's like, well, he's running. Maybe I should be running.
Maybe I should be
doing something, right? But same thing. I see my husband, get out of bed and eat potato chips for breakfast. And I'm like, well, if he's doing it, it's fine. I can do that too, right? Like, so it's that relationship between, this power of who is close to you and this, kind of subconscious sometimes imitation of their habits is a lot to do with the cue, right? A lot to do with what you see and hear and experience, around those people. But yeah, so the close is so important, right? Because of all the environment, because of all of that. And I think there's 500 million stories we could probably tell in that space. But the next one is the many, right? So this is, we do things because everybody else is doing them, right? We don't even know why we're doing things sometimes. We're just doing them because that's what we do around here. Like when we look at like leadership, leadership coaching and leadership development, culture is one of the things I always have people look at because, and especially that unwritten culture, because it's what do we all do around here that like is the unwritten rule that is serving us or not serving us, right? Is it a positive thing or a negative thing? But I was telling you earlier about this funny video that I was watching about a study that they did. And so what they did was they had somebody come into a waiting room, like a doctor's office type waiting room. And the person was the test subject. And when they walked in, there was one person sitting there. And all of a sudden, this chime goes off like a ding. And the actor in the room stands up when it dings and then sits back down, right? Obviously, there's no reason for that. Like, it's craziness. Why would anybody do that? So that happens a few times, right? Every, few seconds or whatever, minute or so, it dings. Eventually, the other person starts to stand up too. They're like, well, if this guy's doing it, then maybe I'll do it. Like, so they kind of, like you can watch them sort of be like, I don't know. And then more and more actors come into the room and they all do the same thing, right? Chime goes off and, everybody stands up, everybody sits down. And so then the test subject eventually is like standing up and sitting down. Like this is completely normal behavior. Like it's totally insane, but like completely normal behavior that they're doing this. And so it's because there were many people doing it, right? One guy at first, and the person's like, oh, maybe like this seems a little crazy. But as soon as a second person or a third person, a fourth person comes in and they're all doing that same behavior, this person's like, yep, confidently stand up and sitting back down when this chime, arbitrary chime goes off. Then all those actors leave and it's just the person left. They continue to do it long after the other people are gone. It chimes and they stand up and sit down. Then somebody new comes in, right? A new actor comes in and the chime goes off and the test subject stands up, sits down when the chime goes off. And the person looks at them and is like, what are you doing? And the person's like, I don't know. Everyone else was doing it before. So they continue this crazy behavior because everybody's doing it. And it was this super powerful, imagery and explanation of, we don't even know why we do things sometimes. We just do them because everybody's doing it, right? It's the social norm to do it. And you have to, again, bring yourself into consciousness to sort of deconstruct that. Am I doing this behavior because everybody's doing it, or am I doing this behavior because I want to be doing it?
Mm-hmm. Or is it bringing you value? James says in the book that there's tremendous internal pressure to comply with the norms of a group. The reward of being accepted is often greater than the reward of winning an argument, looking smart, or finding truth. Most days we'd rather be wrong with the crowd than to be right by ourselves, which it sounds like is what happened with this guy in this video that you saw. And then James goes on to say that when changing your habits means challenging the tribe, change becomes unattractive. When changing your habits means fitting in with the tribe, change is very attractive. So again, going back to, what do you want to be like? What do you want to be known for? Who do you want to be known as? What environment do you need to be around and or in? This is the challenge of the day right now for a lot of people who are unemployed, who are seeking work, because they're looking to fill a void. They're looking to get a job. But I share with every one of my clients that I'm coaching for career mobility and transition right now, don't just run away from something, run towards something that you want. In other words, if you didn't like something about where you just left, even if you were laid off or terminated from your job, why would you go look for that same thing? It's the same reason people get into bad relationships time and again. They pick the same bad people over and again because there's something attractive or comfortable about where they came from, even if it wasn't attractive and it wasn't comfortable because it was normal to them.
Yeah, I can think of a million different examples that I've seen in other people and in my own life where it's like, I knew the thing maybe wasn't the right thing to do or the best thing to do, but I did it anyways. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, parents, I think, see this all the time. It's like, why did you do this? And it's like, well, everybody was doing it. It's that, well, if such and such jumps off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge? Like, maybe, depends on the bridge and how fun it looks. Right? Like, are we jumping into like a really deep river? Sure. Like, yeah, that sounds like a good time. But, it's that thought process of, you're totally right. You've got to stop and really think about, is what I'm going towards the right thing? And you have to know how powerful that the desire to fit in with the many really is and how much that influences your life, because you can, again, either that works against you because it's dragging you down a path you don't want to go, or it works for you because it's pushing you in the direction you really do want to head, right? I'm surrounded by a whole bunch of runners and I want to be a runner. Great. Right. I'm trying to eat healthier and I'm sitting at lunch with a bunch of people who all have salads. Like, okay, like everybody's doing it. I might as well do it. Right. So you can leverage the way we work in a way that really does serve you.
Yeah. We talk a lot with School of Thoughts around helping people pursue their passions and elevate their potential and really follow a life of purpose and meaning. And so in the book, it talks about, under Imitating the Powerful, that humans want to pursue power, prestige, and status. Now, I think that's a pretty generic statement because I don't think everyone wants to pursue power, prestige, and status. I think people want to pursue peace, pursue passion and potential and purpose in their life, but you get acknowledged and recognized for your power. And you get a raise based on your power or your skills. And so how can you live authentically and imitate the powerful, but in a way that you're defining what does power mean?
That's a great question, right? 'Cause James says if a behavior can get us approval, respect, and praise, we find it attractive. And so I think the thing maybe then what you would have to do to get this right for yourself would be to consider somebody powerful, to have the things that you approve of, you respect, and you would want to praise, right? Like if you can find those people and make those people become the powerful people in your life, right? Like I think we said on this episode or many others, like I love Simon Sinek's work. I love Brene Brown's work, right? Like I love a lot of like we love John Maxwell's work, right? Like to me, those are the powerful people. They're the big players in the space because I approve of the message that they're, putting out there in the world. I respect what they're doing. So I think, again, if you can come into some consciousness on what are the things that I value, what are my values, what do I approve of as far as behaviors go, and then how do I look towards those people instead of looking towards people who are maybe the antithesis of my value system and what I'm looking at, right? Like if I'm looking at people who are just about, are just power hungry, make all the, like they're a billionaire, but they've crushed everybody to get there. Like if that's not who you are, if you value people, that's not the person to watch, right? Go find the person who's become really successful while valuing people, right? And what does that look like? And what do those people do? Make them powerful, make them big in your space.
So maybe the idea here is to define what does success mean to you, because it says in the book that we try to copy the behavior of successful people because we desire success ourselves. And you mentioned John Maxwell says that you can live a life of success or you can live a life of significance. But once you've tasted significance, then success doesn't satisfy anymore. And so it's really around defining what is success for you and how do you imitate somebody of significance. And maybe power doesn't mean prestige and status and money and fame and glory. I know a lot of miserable rich people. Money does not give you happiness. Truly, it doesn't. And so it's really around what is motivating you and how do you avoid the behaviors and the people that are bringing less to you than you want, and you putting yourself in an environment to get more of what you do want. So rounding out this chapter, it's about the role of family and friends in shaping your habits and the cultures that we live in. Sam, any key takeaways from this chapter for you?
I think, right, this is about making it attractive. So I think understand what you are currently attracted to, right, when it comes to habits and things like that, and understand what you want to be attracted to, right? Like, and what does that look like? And then look around at these three things. Look around at the close and the many and the powerful and see, is this matching? Is this not matching for me? Because if it's not matching for you, then update the close. Look at maybe a different many. There's 7 billion people on this planet. There's many of many. So go find the many that works for you. And the powerful, like you said, I love your thought around like redefining what power really is and looking at that. Like think about that for yourself, because then if you surround yourself with the right close, the right many, and the right powerful for whoever you're trying to become here, then you're building in that attractiveness. You're building in that imitation of what you want.
Absolutely. Well, next time we're going to be talking about how hard it is to change and also how to fix and find the causes of the things that might be considered bad habits. So we're going to end for today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with others. We'd love to hear your feedback on what you're taking away from the episodes. You can share your thoughts with us on our LinkedIn page called School of Thoughts. Scott will have the links to that in the show notes. Next time is Chapter 10, Fixing and Finding the Causes of Our Bad Habits. And until then, on behalf of my friend Sam Powell, my name is Denise Russo. Thanks for joining us this week again for another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.